We are officially live with my amazing grad school friend and colleague, even personal model, right? Like I won't even throw that out there, right? Like you be modeling, I'll be, we be knowing.
I try to do a little something.
You be cute or whatever. My good friend Bobbie, Denise, Cole. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to connect with you. Like it's been forever since we actually had like full conversation, right? Aside from a little text message here and there. So I'm excited for the time with you connecting.
So much growth.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Can you just imagine, like think about where we were in 2009?
2007 to 2009, like just in grad school together, living the grad school life, all the
housing
life. Living the 2000s grad school life, yes. Right? Like, YouTube wasn't really popping like that yet, right? We wasn't like Facebook was a thing, but we wasn't like, becoming like models and educators on social. It was more about memes and just being funny, right? You know what I'm saying? And
yes. Sometimes I read them statuses and I'm like, what was I talking about? I got a whole brand to protect now. I can't be writing that type of stuff.
I definitely had to delete, right? After before was it May or April 2009? I definitely had to delete.
You just out here reckless, just reckless.
Albums, full-blown photo albums, full-blown whole years of content. Like Facebook hopefully never brings that out the archive.
Oh, they got it. I mean, it's somewhere. It lives somewhere, dark.
And so, thank you again for just accepting my invite to the Black History Month Facebook series where we just talk Black people with Black people, just giving Black folks a message, right, of inspiration, motivation, or just, any kind of self-care, right? Like self-preservation, because that is also important as well. And so, let's just start with, tell us a little bit about yourself and like, how'd you get to AVP of William and Peace University, right?
Oh my goodness. Well, Detroit girl at heart. You know that I'm from Detroit, Michigan, born and raised from the actual city, not a suburb.
Not the suburb. You gotta say that.
City of Detroit. And I attended Albion College for undergrad, bounced over to Grand Valley State for my master's in education, which was a total fluke. Like I was going into broadcast journalism and hated my internship senior year. And somebody told me, a mentor told me, you should think about student affairs because, I was that student leader that did every single thing on campus. And I applied to Grand Valley so late, like completely late. And I got an assistantship.
What happened?
I got an assistantship because somebody didn't take one. And the rest is like history. Like I didn't do any of the placement. I didn't do any of that. I promise you, I applied like maybe April or something. I didn't know what I was doing in my life.
Okay.
Got the assistantship. And then, joined College Student Affairs Leadership and had just a very traditional progressive housing and residence life route. Worked in housing through Illinois and then came down to Raleigh, North Carolina. Just needed something different for my life.
Yeah. And
was at the point where I had always been about taking the risk, right? And if it looked like it would add value, then I was going to make it happen. So I came down here to Raleigh and I'm at William Peace University, came down here as Director of Residence Life and Housing and was, promoted into my AVP position in 2019 and had just been doing some really great things down here, really trying to help build. We are a young university. We went co-ed under a decade ago. So we were all women's college, but went co-ed and became a university. So very young, right? And came down here to really help build an on-campus student experience and have just fallen in love with my life in Raleigh and picked up all my little side hustles. And I'm just having a good experience down here. So yes, I'm looking forward to sharing something with the people. But yeah, that's my little story.
Well, I feel like, and you already got a little heart. So I want to acknowledge, right? You got somebody watching that's like, yo, you said something that needed to be elaborated on. And so if you got questions, make sure that you're in the chat. I'm monitoring the chat, making sure that you ask whatever you need or get clarity on whatever you need. But I think something came out about taking risk, right? And I want to honor the fact that you talked about it's okay to be late. Right. And so let's dive deeper into that a little bit as far as like career development and stuff like that.
Yeah. So even as a young person, have always been very intentional, right, and strategic in what I do. And I always knew, right, that my stability was going to be based on me. I have a phenomenal family, right? But I always knew that my security, my stability was going to be up to me. And so I have always tried to make decisions where those values were going to be met, right? I was always going to be secure. I was always going to be stable. I would always be indispensable in any space that, I was in. And so when I kind of talked about taking risks, it was really about me coming down here, was about taking an opportunity to develop as a person first, right? I had went to the cornfields of Illinois for the job before coming here. And at that time, I had made a decision that I would never do that to myself again, right? That I would never choose my professional life over my personal life. So when I made the decision to come to Raleigh, I had never even been to North Carolina. I had came for an interview. I fell in love with it. And I knew that I could come down here and add tremendous value in the space that I was in. And in turn, to a certain extent, make myself invaluable, if that makes sense. And so it was really about just picking up everything, leaving everything that I knew to come down here and to create the life that I wanted for myself. If you follow me on social media, I'm all about becoming my best self and pouring into the woman that I am. And so coming down to North Carolina was really about doing that, really grabbing hold to who is this woman that I see myself being, and creating the opportunities to become that person. And I've been very intentional and strategic about all of the different risks that I've taken. I would call them like calculated risk, right? And really making decisions that were not only good for me now, but also for the long game. And I was just having a conversation with a friend the other day, as people are talking about whether they're going to leave industry and switch jobs and do all this other stuff, I was talking about also the power of stillness too. And that I think there are some people who are in this space where they're trying to figure out what their next steps are, and they're not able to make the best decisions for themselves. They're confused, they don't know what to do, but there's power in stillness too, right? And I was in that situation before of like trying to decide, what do I do next and where do I go? And nothing fit, nothing was working. And I realized that I had to be still. And the pandemic was, it was that forced stillness, but I found so much peace in that. And so for me, it was about, when do I take the calculated risk and when do I practice stillness, and being able to find that sense of harmony in my life. And I think it has really been beneficial to me. And I've been very blessed in being able to find the harmony between those two things.
Oh my God. Wow. Okay. So I ain't about to go churching, y'all, right? The Bible talks about stillness, right? It talks about how God says that some of his best works was done in prisons, done by the sick, by the weak, right? And how the stillness is something that needs to be appreciated because it allows opportunity for rest, right? It allows opportunity for rejuvenation. And also, I won't even say like maybe even an opportunity to re-enter in a different way, right? A reflection opportunity, right? Or even reflexive opportunity, right? Thinking about your thoughts. And so, give us a idea of like, where do you first feel it, and when do you really like be like, all right, like I know I need to like sit back, right? I need to calm down. I need to slow down. Like how do you first acknowledge that?
I think for me, it is anxiety. It is confusion, right? It's when I'm feeling disaligned, like my values aren't matching up with what I'm trying to do or the space that I'm in. It's all of kind of that negative energy for me that makes me take that step back and say, okay, Bobbie, you gotta settle. You gotta be still. Cause I am always like, if I was watching something the other day with Rihanna, and she was saying how if she's doing it, she's already bored in it, right? And it's always the what next. And I've always been like that. Okay, I'm in this space now, got this, now what's next? And as I got older, I had to realize that I had to be able to appreciate the present. I had to be able to appreciate where I am right now, absorb all of the lessons from that, right? Absorb everything from those moments and practice that stillness when I am feeling frustrated or confused, or I don't have a sense of clarity, or I can't make decisions that align with my values because I have not taken that time, right, to be intentional, to check in with myself. And for me, it's also just this mindfulness, it's well-being. I'm always on, right? Mm-hmm. In my position, I'm always having to be on. In life, like my cousin and I call ourselves like the golden ponies of the family, right? Okay. We're the ones that like people call when something's going wrong. We're the ones that people call if they need a couple dollars, right? Mm-hmm. And so in life, I don't really have the freedom. And, you know, Black woman, right? Strong Black woman syndrome. I don't have the freedom to have moments where I cannot have it together. And so that hermit mode for me, that stillness gives me that opportunity to practice that mindfulness, check in with myself and make some decisions that are for me. It's when I choose me, right? And I take that time to do that.
Oh my God. Oh my gosh.
You're making me feel like I'm saying some important stuff.
Yo, you getting hearts in here. Like, I ain't gonna lie, you hitting hearts right now. And I think that's necessary to talk about how our feelings mm-hmm. need to be validated by us first. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, and I'll be honest, like I'm Black man, grew up very traditional, like I guess traditional Black male stereotypical upbringing, machismo, right? Kind of, trying to, be, I validated myself by how many women I can be with or be around or, get numbers, and not having emotional connections with women, really only looking for physical, those type of things. So I recognized how that played a role in how I show up in my marriage, with my children, right? With my family, my mother, right? Being unemotionally connected, right? And that stops you from being in the present. Mm-hmm. It stops you from being recognizing the moment. And so I wonder, like, what do you say to folks to give themselves the freedom? Like, how do you liberate somebody, to help them liberate themselves? You hear about Black women all the time, and you talked about this before we started talking. Being in positions that they know is draining them, but staying, right? And we can even talk about, I learned this from my mother, seeing her being in a bad marriage and staying after multiple incidents of things happening. We hear this all the time with Black women. There's a history of that, right? Going all the way back to slave time, where enslaved Black women still tried their best to meet the needs of everybody, even when their needs are not being met. What do we do to liberate folks?
I think for me, it's first modeling the way, right? Role modeling, because it's funny because, I have my social media platform and I do a lot on self-care, self-worth, loving yourself, choosing yourself as a woman, especially for me as a single woman. I don't have any children. And so celebrating life, celebrating myself, and you'll be surprised, like older Black women or older women or different people, even men, have made comments to me about how vain it is, or how I have pictures of myself in my house, right? And someone came into my house and was just like, oh, that's just so vain. You just have pictures of you. And I was like, but if it was me and my child, would you say that? Like, this is my life and this is my space. And I can't celebrate myself in my own space. But this idea of especially Black women, like celebrating ourselves, loving ourselves in a society that magnifies, right, our insecurity, or that doesn't accept the pieces of us if they are within us and not within another culture of women. And so I think for me, it's like modeling that and being able to show that. Through the pandemic, I really had to tap into another level of vulnerability, like as a leader, that I had never tapped into before. Like, you know me kind of from school and professional and stuff, and I could be very, very like stoic because I don't have a choice, right? And it's like, I've never felt like I had a choice to be vulnerable in a workspace or a professional space or to show emotion. I feel like I've always had to being able to make the decisions, being able to make the moves, right? Demonstrating myself, presenting myself as this boss babe. I cried in a like leadership meeting at the height of the pandemic because I was so overwhelmed. And I mean, just these mini breakdowns here and there, and trying to care for people and students and myself, worried about my family. It was so much going on, but it taught me how to tap into vulnerability as a leader, as a woman leader, in a way that I did not give myself permission to do because I thought it would be seen as a negative against me in the workspace, and that I'd be seen as weak or I would lose some credibility. And so for me, it's really just been about modeling the way, but then also giving myself the permission to grow in these ways. And that's been hard. I mean, it's hard, and I'm still, growing and struggling to do some of that, but it's hard because, like you said before, this is historical. This is like ingrained in us. This is generational. And I see so many women in our generation, especially Black women, that are living our lives in ways that our mothers and grandmothers and great grandmothers would never have lived their lives. I mean, I am, mid-30s and single, no kids. I mean, hopefully it will happen. If it don't happen, but I'm not. My life is not incomplete because that hasn't happened for me yet, right? And I just think watching the generations of women just change what it means to be a woman, a Black woman, a leader in society is beautiful to see.
Right. Educated, it's, executive, right? Like those things are also true when we are talking about Black women in today's society. I want to acknowledge the chat, right? We got Candace Johnson, family from, Grand Valley State, Laker for a lifetime. She says strong Black woman syndrome is our worst enemy for real. And she also said, I hope you put them out of your house.
I did put them out. Because if you can't appreciate me celebrating me, I know you're not about to celebrate me because God made me to be celebrated and spoiled. So
say that one more time for folks that didn't catch that.
If you can't appreciate me celebrating me, I know you're not going to celebrate me appropriately in the way I deserve to be celebrated. So, there you have it.
She said, don't let the doorknob hit you. Yo, I've even been learning this new lesson of, go where you're celebrated, and the reality of the situation is that you're not going to be celebrated everywhere.
No.
Right. And so like, how do you find that with others? Now we talked about ourselves, but then finding that in community is also important, right? So like, how do Black folks break through this idea that I gotta do it alone? Like I was born in this world by myself. I'm gonna go out by, all these old sayings that's just totally contradictory to all things that we know success, right? Like LeBron didn't make it to where he is by himself. All of our most famous actresses and actors didn't make it to, Serena didn't make it to, there would be no Serena without Venus, right? And those things are important to say, right? Why don't we take these advice from even like why do we have this individualistic perspective on success?
I don't know. It's a big question. I mean, I think the things that come to my mind, right, is survival, right? It's about I need to secure my space so I can be celebrated. And I don't know if it's possible for multiples of us to be celebrated. So if only one of us is going to be celebrated, it's going to be me. Right. And I don't know, maybe it's the survival. Honestly, I don't know. I wish that we were right in community more. I wish that that was something, and I think it is happening. You see it happening right in pockets, but from a more broad standpoint, I get totally what you're saying. I don't know, Dar. What do you think?
This idea of scarcity,
yeah,
it's real, right? This idea that if I win, it can't be a win-win for all of us, right? And this is one of the reasons why I'm doing these lives with people that I believe that is just has messages and words for people, right? Is because I need to take more time to celebrate others, right? Especially my community, people who I know have seen me grow and come up and change, right? Become the person who I am today, which is totally different from who I was in college, right? And I almost in a way need to create space to even celebrate myself, right? And because I found that I was falling into this trap of like being self-made, listening to, I ain't saying rap is, wrong or nothing is wrong with rap or anything like that. I'm saying that a lot of the messages that are put out there are contradictory to the messages that got them there, right? A lot of them, disrespect women, but they get to the point of their careers on the backs of women, right? And one of them is, one of the most famous rappers of all time, Drake. A lot of women scrutinize him for always talking bad on women, but at the end of the day, his number one, his number one support system, his number one audience is women, Black women. Always talks about how the dancers, was held him down all his early career, right? Those things need to be said more, right? And I ain't going against. I still love rap. My playlist is real right now. You know what I mean? But I also am not so naive to believe that all things that's said is right, and that all truth, or all things that's said in rap is truth, right? I'm not that naive, but I'm also 37 years old, right? Like I have matured in that way, whereas my 20-year-old self probably couldn't distinguish the difference. And so I think it's a lot of that happening where we think that it's just, I gotta win, you gotta lose, because we've always been put against each other in the culture, right? It's, so I even think about just as children, how we compare children, right? So can read now, I even thought my son, I was like, man, my son is a few months younger than his cousin, but he ain't talking yet. He ain't reading yet. He ain't doing math yet. And I'm just like, I need to get out of this idea that his genius, it needs to be compared to somebody else's genius, right? We all have that. And that's another reason why that's what I got from rap, right? Thinking about Jay-Z and how he talks about, we all have like $1 million genius, but we just have to find ways to tap into that. And everybody can't be a rapper. Everybody can't be the best rappers, right? But there's other places in music. Everybody can't be the speaker, right? The best educator, but there's other places in education that we need to exist in. And so, that's my, I guess, idea.
It made me think of that, comparison is a thief of joy, right? And comparison takes away your ability to be satisfied and content and with your own life, your own gifts, because you're constantly comparing. That was something that I still struggle with, but I struggle with deeply in my 20s was comparison. And social media just magnifies that because you only see what people want you to see, right? You don't see what it took to get to that space, or you don't see what happens after that photo. And comparison will really destroy your own sense of joy and peace or satisfaction or contentment with what you got going on and your own gifts, and remove your ability to see the value of what you can contribute. And I think it made me think about when you talked about scarcity and community and celebrating. I think too, it's a difference in being in community that celebrates us and being in community that tolerates us. And I think a lot of us are positioned in communities that tolerate us, and it triggers or magnifies that sense of survival and scarcity that you talked about. Whereas maybe on the other side, being in communities that truly celebrate can bring out some of that sense of community. I don't know, but I think there's a difference in being in a community that tolerates or uses you for what you bring, rather than being in communities that actually celebrate your presence.
Yeah. And ooh, so this is going to get interesting, right? Because nobody's going to hire somebody to be an AVP if they don't bring some value.
I hope not.
Right. Well, I hope not. We hope, right? But folks, so you're gonna, and what we know is a job will never pay us what we're worth. Right? If we get paid 100,000, we really are worth 500, right? Maybe even a meal,
cool meal,
maybe, right? And so, but how do you balance that? Because then I'm not in the business of telling people quit your job, right? Go be an entrepreneur and all that. Like I'm not that type of leader. I do believe that we all should have businesses. I do believe that we all should have some type of auxiliary income just in case, because sometimes we can't trust these jobs. But that's a balancing act. What do you think that, what's the message that folks should be thinking about when we're thinking about that?
I don't know. My experience, I was promoted into my position. So I have been at my institution for 2 years and really felt like I was doing the work and doing things that no one else was doing, right? And creating things that no one else was creating, being able to connect with students in ways that other people weren't. And one thing that, you go through your career, especially in education and university settings, right, that are built on whiteness. And many times you are one of few people of color in those spaces. The higher up you go, the less people that look like you around the table. And that used to wear on me a lot. And I made a very conscious decision when I came to North Carolina midway through that I would never allow myself to see my identity as a negative, that I would never allow myself to feel like or to be seen as a token, that my identity is a bonus in this space, that nobody else around this table can do what I can do because of this bonus of the fact that I am a Black woman that comes from a working class family, that comes from Detroit, that is the first generation student. So all of the other skills that I have and I bring to the table make me valuable, but you also get this bonus of me as a Black woman. And I'm going to be invaluable in that space because there's nobody else that look like me. And so I made the decision that I would tap into that piece of it, that I wouldn't keep, because it's taxing to keep looking around the table and you don't see nobody look like you and you constantly in this mental warfare with yourself. But I had to flip it in order to thrive and not just survive in my spaces. So when I'm in these spaces, this is a bonus. This is an added layer of value that I'm bringing, and I lean into it wholeheartedly. So I think there's people that they feel like that. They feel like I'm just a token in this space. They only want me here because I'm Black or because I'm Hispanic or because I'm this or because I'm that. And I really challenge people to, for one, honor and recognize your competencies and your expertise. Like people rarely out here just paying people because they Black. I mean, but if you are one of few in a space, to lean into that bonus that you bring, this identity that you were born with, and this value that you bring because of it. Like, I'm able to connect with students, I'm able to connect with community, I'm able to do things and move in ways that nobody else can.
Yeah.
And I use that, right? I use that as a part of my brand, as a part of who I am as a professional, because why not? It's who I am, it's how I'm showing up. And so it's an added layer to the value that I'm bringing wherever I'm going.
You know, I love that. You know, I even kind of think about two ways that, you know, you kind of made me think about this. One, I think Black folks, we put too much value on money and not enough value on time. Right. And so here's my, you know, experience with it. Working in, you know, higher ed, working in a staff position, not getting the opportunities that I felt like I wanted to get. Watching people like you, like Rex, move up the ladder, right? Like, and I'm still in the coordinator role. And it wasn't until these incidents start happening, and I ended up quitting my job, taking a $40,000 pay cut. But what that afforded me the opportunity to do was start my business, become a, you know, really like take ownership of the father, like being a father. Like, my son was with me 3 days out the week, other than the 2 days he was at daycare with his grandma, right? Like, really spending those early years, him watching me do homework as a PhD student, also afforded me opportunity to learn what it meant to be a full-time teaching fellow. Now I'm a faculty member, right? The time that because initially somebody's like, you took a $40,000 pay cut with a house, a wife, a child, and a daycare bill. You know, and the daycare bills ain't no joke, right? But I had to shift my mindset of saying, if I don't make this shift now, it will never get easier. My son gets older, my relationships gets, you know, more committed. It doesn't get easier to make a decision like this. And so I had to put it like, if I value my time more than this money, then this is the right decision for me, right? And it may pay huge dividends, right? Huge dividends. I think another thing is like, I learned so much from being a father that, like, I thought that being a better husband and father meaning I need to make more money. And what that experience taught me was that in order to make more money, I need to be a better husband and father, right? I need to prioritize really what's really important, right? And that was the change. That was the shift, that at the end of the day, these jobs don't value my family the way that I do. And so they will never advocate for time with my family. Uh-oh. Did you hear me? Am I froze? Oh no, hold on. I look ugly too. All right, hold on 1 second. You know, hey, we in virtual, man.
We virtual. There's tech issues. We work our way through it.
We're gonna make through it.
Stick with us, people. Stick with
us. All right, here we go.
There you go.
So yeah, you know, these jobs will never advocate for me to spend time with my family like I would. They would never, right? If anything, when you're good at your job, they want more of your time, right? And so I think that's critical when evaluating whether or not you're ready to liberate yourself from or make a pivot, right? Or make a move. Is, what are you really doing it for? What is your really deep down conviction? If it's just money, I think money motivates people to do a lot of things. But I'm not sure if it's enough to make you help you find the worthiness, right? And the well-being that we're talking about, right? And so now, as a faculty member, I just had a son, you know, he's 3 months old. I'm on a 9-month contract. My son was born in November. I ended up continuing teaching through the semester, but I don't go back to work until August. I'm off on paternity leave from January until August. You know what I'm saying? Like,
That's a long time.
God is
That's
good,
beautiful,
right?
right? That you get that opportunity.
But we have to, but we don't know that these opportunities are down the line unless we really decide to make the decision to choose ourselves, to choose our values, to really put who we say we put first for real.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's all about the values. And like you said, I'm students in like career professional development classes. And I mean, every single level of class, no matter what year they are, we're talking about values, and we're spending time talking about values, because at the end of the day, if you think about people that are unhappy in their job, I mean, all this stuff with the Great Resignation, there, many of that is disalignment of values, or people also don't realize your values are fluid, and that's okay. Your values can change, like as things happen in your life and you have these crucible moments, right? Your values will change. And maybe, yes, when you first graduated from college, you just got, you were about stacking, you was about getting the bag, right? And that was it. And so you were chasing the dollar, and then a moment happened where that was no longer the value and something else became a value. And now you have to make new decisions to align with your values. But if you don't make those new decisions, then you're going to be unhappy. And I would say for me, like every time I've made a decision to leave a job, it was because there was a shift in values, and sometimes it didn't have anything to do with that place. It was I needed something different for my life and for the experience that I wanted to have, right? And that was how I made a decision to make a leap. It wasn't just because I wanted to move up. It was because there was a change and a shift in my values, and I needed something different for myself. So I think that though, you know, we have these conversations when we're in college and all of this stuff. And I feel so blessed that I teach the class, because every semester I do the activity with my students. And so it's that constant reminder of coming back to my core and reevaluating my values. And I challenge people all the time, when you become adults and you think you got it figured out, go online and do one of them values activities. I bet you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised at what is now important to you, and maybe what in your life is no longer aligned with that, or who in your life is no longer aligned with that. And maybe you need to make some decisions and some changes, and, you know, let people go, move on, make some new choices.
I'm pulling up. I want to show this, because you talk about prioritizing values, and I highly agree. Right. I want to share this with the fam. Right. How many folks we got on here? We had like 5 or 6. Oh, we down to like 1, but that's fine. Hey, yo. So this is what I do with my students when we talk about prioritizing values, because I think, like you said, values are fluid. And what I've learned, you know, shout out to, you know, one of my former colleagues who introduced me to this, is from the Life Values Inventory. I'm not sure if there's a company or still existing. They created this activity where you talk about what values do you over attend to, what values do you under attend to, what are your high priority values, what are your medium to low priority values. I want to show this really quick, because I think that is critical, right? And so when I do this with students, I give them, I'm like, yo, like the reality of the situation is that everything is not a high priority, right? The reality of the situation is that everything can't be number one, right? And when we actually go through this with students and let students see each other values, they get a chance to really see how students are negotiating values differently based on lived experience, based on cultural background, based on cultural identity, based on financial positioning, right? Like those things play a role in how we decide to live our lives, right? And so, wow, when you said that was just like, yo, like, how do you know, what do you think when you folks are like, what are folks getting out of this when you do this activity or do an activity like this with students?
I mean, I think it's just light bulb moments for them, because many of them have never thought about what they value. It's the values from their families, or the value, and those values are based on culture, generation, lived experiences, and they really kind of just grabbed hold to whatever values their family subscribes to, as opposed to them actually thinking about it for themselves. And so it's just these light bulb moments. I think like you see some of them being torn, right, between the things that they thought they valued because of their upbringing versus the things that they actually truly do or want to value as they live their life and make these separations from what they've known, especially being down here in the South, where there's, a lot of disconnect sometimes between what my students who are more open to inclusion and diversity and want to learn and want to explore, and maybe some families or some generational things within their family. And so you start to see them make meaning of things for themselves in ways that they just really haven't before, especially freshmen and sophomores.
Ooh, and we can get into this all day because this is my lifeblood, right? Like I always, the first thing that I ask students when I'm in classes with them, because we do a cultural, one of the first things I like to do, and I'm thankful that I'm in an institution that in a department that actually cares about like trying to include cultural identity into leadership studies, right? Because that, that's missing. Is one of the first activities we do is like, tell me who you are. Like go 2 to 3 generations back and tell me how did these people get you to where you are today? Like, grandma, great grandma, great grandpa, what about them helped you be who you are, right? So they go through this activity, which is I love. They do a whole portfolio on it, do a website, whatever, presentation we share out. And then here comes the big question. I'm like, okay, how do you know your values are yours? They'd be like, what? What you mean? How do I know my values are mine? They mine. Like I chose them. Like, but did you choose them, or were they presented on the wall for you as the only options? Right? And a lot of us Black folks get caught into that.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, and what we don't usually do is when we get in trouble by espousing some of these values, we don't take ownership. We place the blame on the family member, when the reality is once you become a certain age, we need to find ways to be able to decide and discern what we want to keep and what we want to give away, right? Give away, throw away, put away in the back, put on the curb real quick, right? Maybe put it on the side table. We'll pick it up later. Whatever, however you want to, it's one of those situations. And I often say to students, your values is yours when you tested them.
Yeah.
Right. And so they like, what do you mean tested them? I was like, anybody grew up in a religious home? A few of them like, yeah, right. How many of y'all still in that same religion? Okay, maybe not, right? How many of y'all told your parents why you ain't in that same religion? And then they all like, I ain't had that conversation yet. Right. Or the ones who have had that conversation know that conversation is a little sticky when you have really religious parents. Right. I'm one of them, And so moving away from non-denominational Bible school to spiritual, to acknowledging all religions as truth in some way, shape, or form is very different from what I grew up with, where it's like, this is right, this is wrong. If you do this, you're going to hell, and that was a test, and so I'm oftentimes wondering, like, how do you get students to push themselves, or people, right, to just push themselves beyond their boundaries, to thinking deeper, and then we'll close this thing out.
I like that kind of conversation around the test, and I'm going to use that. So just FYI, I'm going to use that in my class with my students. But I think you brought up something that's just so critical, especially in Black and Black families. And as I've gotten older, right, this idea of navigating relationship with parents and guardians as an adult. in being a grown woman talking to Gregory and Rhonda Cole about my grown woman decisions and values and priorities, right? And like, and is just so different now to be navigating that. And, you know, like we're all figuring this out together, right? As we grow. And I was talking to someone about just buying a home and how, yes, I was taught so much in my life, but I wasn't taught how to buy a house. Like I wasn't taught how to navigate all of this other stuff that I'm trying to do in life. And so now navigating relationships and different things with family and having boundaries and saying, you know what, I'm actually not going to get on that flight to come to that because that's not going to bring me peace. And I need to be maintaining peace in my life. And navigating that conversation with family, or, you know, the religion and mental health conversation with family. And, you know, yes, we could pray about it, but we should probably get a therapist too. Like we can do both, right?
You can do both.
You can do both. You can do both, right? And so this whole idea of growing up and becoming an adult in a new space, and how I think I view the world and my lived experiences, like just being in education and what we are exposed to, right? As educators, people of so many different identities and cultures. And I mean, every day you're having these very enriching and educational and theoretical and philosophical, right, conversations.
Right.
And you know, you got to learn how to turn that on and off. And how do you interact with people back home or in spaces that you might have grew up in that are not at this space that we're in the academy? Because the academy space is totally different than the hood back home. And so how do I move within those spaces? And I mean, I think just growing up, like as a Black woman from first generation from Detroit, like, and having to navigate boundaries and these new conversations that people didn't talk about. People didn't really talk about mental health. People didn't really talk about depression and suicidal ideation and religion. That wasn't even a conversation. You went here. This is the church. This is where you go. And I had that conversation when I made the decision to move away from very traditional, non-denominational church. And I remember very vividly saying I was going to a church that, you know, they didn't believe in speaking in tongues in the church. And that, I did not expect that conversation to go where it went. And I had my reasons, right? But so this is all, I think, so new to so many of us in our 30s and 20s. And again, for me, it's that role modeling and modeling the way. Like for me, being able to have conversations with my baby sister about how to navigate and choose her child and have boundaries and live her life. And yeah, it might be difficult. Like sometimes, I mean, I hope my mom not watching this, but sometimes I block her for like 2 days just because like I need a minute, and then I come back to it. And so, you know, it's all new though. And I feel like we're navigating this together, like as this generation of young, educated Black people figuring out what is life like for us now in this space. How do we move, like you said, how do we test out these values and actually live them in a way that is very different from maybe how we were raised, or is not as well received with the generations before us.
Right. Wow. Ooh.
I hope my mom not watching.
Yo, my mom be watching this stuff too, yo. I mean, I'll be like, yo, mom, I still believe in the faith, right? I still faith, I have it, right? Mm-hmm. But I think it's also my inclusive values just go against being able to just speak negatively on other people that's like really not trying to harm nobody, right? They literally just trying to show that they have faith as well in a different way.
Yeah. And that's a whole nother conversation.
Okay. And I ain't no reverend. I ain't trying to act like I am, right? I ain't.
Me neither. I'm not either.
So, you know, it's cool that you open that door, right, for folks to be like, Dr. Jasmine Lee, good colleague and friend. She always talks about like, you got to have multiple ways to say no, right? Sometimes you got to be like, nah. Sometimes you got to be like, Sometimes you just don't say nothing. You just, I gotta excuse myself from this conversation, right? It's not aligned with my values. It's not where I'm trying to go. This is not on my priority list. Like so many different ways that you can set boundaries. It's important to be able to practice those things.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm tapping into this new thing of a different way to say yes. So it's not just different ways to say no, but a different way to say yes. Because some spaces I feel don't afford me with the opportunity to say no, right? Some kind of way I still end up having to do it or being a part of it. And so to avoid that, I have really tried to tap into this different way of saying yes. I can facilitate somebody else doing it. I can guide somebody else to do it. I can provide direction. So for me, because especially in the workspace, right? I told you one of few. And what you said before a while ago, you talked about when you do something very, very well, you're rewarded with more work. And so for me, I really had to learn because, you know, I'm the bomb, right? So like I've had to learn how to have boundaries personally and professionally. And sometimes that no is just, people will ignore a no sometimes. And I figured, okay, so how do I make this palatable for this audience or these people? And it's kind of a different way to say yes. I'm still connected, but you wanted 100% of me and I'm gonna give you 25.
Right. And I'm
gonna empower somebody else through it.
That's I got so much more that we can get. Oh my God. And that's a book, right? That's a book, you know, finding another way to say
don't steal my title, nobody out there.
Okay, you better
you gonna steal it.
I ain't gonna steal it. I'm trying not to say, like, my wife is like, you don't need to say yes to nothing else, right?
Yeah.
Like nothing else, you know. And so I'm gonna listen to my wife.
Yes, that's what you should do.
And so, you know, close us out. Like, what do you got for folks? You know, we've had almost up to 10 folks, you know, show up here, you know, just to hear from you, hear your message. What do you got for folks to just, what's a final word for anybody? Doesn't matter if it's specifically Black women or if it's Black folk or if it's just folk.
Oh my goodness, a final word. It has almost been an hour. I think something that, you know, we talked a lot about values and how we want to live our lives and different things like that. And a couple of years ago, I did a leadership fellows program and I had a phenomenal leadership coach. And we talked a lot about perfectionism and excellence. And I struggle with those two and moving towards excellence and kind of moving away from perfection. And we talked a lot about values and we talked about values as it related to work. And one thing that a message that she gave me that I think is a great way to close is for people to really start with how you want to live your life, like really thinking about inherently how you want to live your life. Reminding yourself you are more than a profession, you're more than a specific identity, right? You're more than a consultant, you're more than a daughter, you're more than a mother, right? But how do you want to live your life? And everything that you do, all of the things that you tap into, all of the things that you align with, they should enable you to live your life the way you choose to live it, right? Your identities, your profession, all of that should not be how you live your life. So think about how you want to live your life. And that was what I had to decide. How do I truly want to live my life? And I am more than my profession. I'm more than these identities. And what I do with my time should enable my life and not the other way around.
Wow.
That's my life.
That's good. That's good. What do you want to plug? Plug something for us.
Oh, well, you know, I'm going to always plug. So I have a podcast. I co-host a podcast with other colleagues that work in education and leadership called the Meeting After the Meeting podcast. So I really encourage you all to like us on Facebook. You can stream all of our podcasts on any of your favorite podcast streaming platforms. We always drop a new episode on Mondays. We talk about career, community, and we just have a really good time. We are just generally friends, but we're also colleagues in education and leadership. So, and you get 7 different perspectives, which is always amazing as well. We don't always agree, but we have good dialogue and good conversation. So yeah, thanks for letting me.
The meeting after the meeting is serious, okay? It's so good. I
Yes.
highly encourage folks to check it out for sure. I'm looking forward to being a guest one day.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes.
On the docket. We gotta connect about that.
We'll figure it out. I'm patient. I'm a patient man. All right, Facebook family. Hey, make sure you catch the replay. We will also be adding this to YouTube. Feel free to reach out to Bobbie if you, again, are looking for ways to learn about self-care, well-being, belonging, right? Also, how to move up in the field. This is a emerging leader, going to be somebody's vice president for sure. One of these days, might be your boss soon enough, okay? Thank you, everybody. See ya.